why do all these companies just blow up? You see, I mean, I see it happen more often than not, right? Because they lose that energy and they lose that feel. And once that's gone, you can't recreate it. The damage has already been done.
Welcome to the Masters of Business podcast with Daniel Beer.
Today we're joined by my friend, Kris Lindahl. He runs Kris Lindahl Real Estate in Minnesota, has expanded to other locations in the region, and somebody that I've known for years. This is going to be a really fun interview, guys. Buckle up, because if you know me, one of my passions is marketing. One of the best marketers that I've met anywhere in business is Kris Lindahl. In fact, I can't even kick off this podcast without just setting the stage. And the seventh inning stretch at a Minnesota Twins game, just to give you guys an idea, when they play the seventh inning stretch, they literally call it the Lindahl stretch. He's known for his outstretched arms image. We can get into that. But he's created a brand that literally is now part of the Minnesota Twins baseball stadium, baseball experience. And I can't be happier. I mean, this guy has even thrown out the first pitch. So Kris Lindahl, welcome, buddy. Welcome to the podcast. And we're going to get into it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm excited, man. I've known you for a long time, and watching your success and having the opportunity to be friends. And even I think about from the early days of where we were and what we were trying to figure out to now getting the opportunity of this podcast. It'll be fun.
Yeah, man, we've been down a road, and I've gotten to have just so many conversations with you about just the way you think. And, one thing that I'll just say right out of the gate, something I always say, or I'm known for saying, is don't play by rules that don't exist. And so many people get locked into these ways of just functioning the same way as everybody else is functioning, as if were literally a rule. And you just don't see the world the same way. You play within the rules 100%.
Yeah.
But you just, like me, and I think, frankly, you've done a better job of it. And that's why I've got you here, and I'm going to learn today. You refuse to play by rules that don't exist, but that are man-made, like these man-made, just made-up rules that kind of lock people into an average way of operating. Does that make sense? Am I putting your mouth, or is that true?
No, that's 100% true. I think so often in life you see, it's like that hard work and talent, all those different quotes, it's like, you see so many people that create like their own roadblocks and their own barriers. When you look at someone, you're like, you have so much talent, right? And I see that often. I think what we have done better than most is we consistently take action, right? And I think what someone from the outside would think is that we're batting 1,000 and we get it right every single time. And more often than not, the first couple of swings, like, we strike out. But we learn from those strikeouts, and then we go get more reps at the batting cages, and then pretty soon we turn those into singles and doubles and triples and then home runs, and every once in a while a grand slam. And so I think what people are seeing in our brand today is a culmination of a lot of at-bats, a lot of reps, a lot of striking out, but really that focus and being dialed into, like, let's just keep going to the batting cage even though we're getting our butt kicked every day. And most people quit and give up. And I think that's what you find in a lot of marketers is they end up getting advertiser fatigue, and they tap out and they're looking for the easy button. They're like, where do I just give the credit card, and where they can just make magic happen, and no one's evaluating anything. And they think that there's this sort of like autoplay option to build this massive brand. And this is why very few get to that level, because you got to be obsessed with it, like you in anything in life.
If you're looking for a marketing masterclass, folks, just like I said, buckle up, and you're about to get it right now from one of the best. And I don't care what industry you're talking about. And frankly, once you get to big business, I'm talking like Fortune 500 business, the amount of creativity, how much it shrinks. I mean, they do well to hire you just for a little consultation. So, all right, Kris, you're talking brand, the size of the brand. Share with the audience. Our audience is in every industry you could possibly think of. Entrepreneurs, business people looking to scale, looking to build, a lot of them with already big businesses, but as you know, they could be bigger. Your brand, I want you to introduce it. You take it. I'll just set the stage with what I already said about the Minnesota Twins baseball games, which is that I don't think I've ever met a person from the state of Minnesota, and I make a habit of testing them every single time. If I bump into somebody from Minnesota, and I'm not even talking Minneapolis, just Minnesota, and I ask them, do you know Kris Lindahl? I'm yet to run into a no.
Yeah.
Not that they know you personally, right? But that they know your brand.
Yeah.
So take us into that. Take us into the evolution of how you've done that as a realtor. Now you have other businesses, and we'll get into that, and feel free to take us there. But as a realtor, when there's tens of thousands of realtors in your metropolitan area, but they all know one guy. That's unheard of.
No, I agree. I agree. And I think there's I think what I kind of shared at the beginning here that is a really important piece of this is in the early days, of course, it was more me. And as we've grown, it's all about the team that you have in place. But I was really good at listening and input, right? So I would just not much different than you, Dan. Like, you're a very curious person. You genuinely want to learn and you're asking questions everywhere you are. I've spent a lot of time with you throughout the years. You are constantly asking and doing research, and not much different with me. So so in the markets that we're in, I'm consistently asking questions, and I'm obsessed with where do people live? Where do they eat? What do they do? What's important to them? What are their priorities? Where do they give back? Like, the understanding who people are and meeting them where they're at and the culture in our communities that we serve is where it started. And so you have to just really, really get yourself into their shoes, not your shoes. And I think the mistake that so many people in marketing make is that, there's this boardroom full of people, and maybe it's an outside agency, and everyone's throwing all these crazy ideas, but no one's really stopped to think, what is it actually like to live in the shoes of who we're looking to connect with, right? And so that's where you start, right? You start there, and then oftentimes you'll put marketing and messaging and branding and things out, and then you'll get feedback, whether that's in the comment section, if that's on Reddit or any social media platform, news articles, you name it. It could be also the telephone game of 5 levels away of the stories that people are saying about you. But all of that input is so important to continue to grow and elevate your brand and your marketing. And so what happens is, I'll tell you what this looks like fast forward. You roll out a strategy and everyone says that was the most genius marketing campaign I've ever seen. But really, all of the work was done in the input, in the evaluation, in the studying of meeting people where they're at. Creating the actual idea and the execution of it was far less time intensive than the effort of learning and understanding where people are at. And I think that's where people don't understand marketing and branding to that level. And so as soon as we changed and got really good at getting curious and studying that, then the things that we launched became better and better and better because we were rolling out things that we knew were going to work. And it just changes so much.
It's huge. Really, really, really big. And so you have, if I distill that down, you're telling us that one of your superpowers is actually curiosity. One of your superpowers is taking action or asking questions. Well, here's the danger to it. Somebody who's really curious, asks a lot of questions, gets so much input that you end up with so many different directions you can go in. Because no matter who you're talking to, they all have the right idea, right? And so how do you discern between an opportunity worth pursuing and there's distractions, there's squirrels, right? There's all those things. And then there's even opportunities that are great opportunities, but maybe just not for you. You have to decipher between all of that. How do you go? What's your framework?
Yeah, I love that you asked that, because I think there are several things that go into this. I think one thing you just mentioned is prioritization, right? So whether this is an EOS framework or scaling up, Rockefeller habits, whatever it may be, like having a prioritization that's like, hey, this is a great idea, but it's got to go on the long-term issues list because we don't have the bandwidth or the ability to focus today. So there's like a core focus issue with a lot of things where you see a lot of people that have high vision that create a bunch of ideas, but nothing ever gets done. They go to a conference and they have 20 different things. They roll back to their office or teams, their company, and they go, hey, here's 50 things, like, let's go today. And then 5 days later, they get on another Zoom or wherever they're on, and they're like, here's 50 more things, do these. And pretty soon, 6, 12, 18 months later, they're just plates that are dropping on the ground everywhere and nothing ever gets done. And so what I would say when you're asking about superpower, what makes me uniquely different is that I am the most off-the-charts visionary that you will find on any assessment. I will break the charts on vision. But what makes me uniquely different, and that's rare, of course, but what makes me even more different is I can execute, right? And I think so often you have high vision people that actually aren't executors, right? And so they create a bunch of ideas and they're fantastic at seeing the future and seeing the gaps. And you had mentioned, Dan, discerning, right? And saying like, hey, here's how we can improve this. Here's how we can make it better. But they really don't have the ability to finish anything. And you and I have met and been around a lot of people like that, where they have fantastic ideas and a million of them a second. but nothing ever gets to the finish line. And so the question I always ask myself today is like, before I even get into the ideation phase of all of this is like, what does done look like? Right? Because I like to go to the end of like, what does done look like? And then I ask myself the question, the people around me, do we actually have the bandwidth to get this done? And in the early days, like I had all these ideas and all these things, and I gas everyone around me, everyone have whiplash, right? And you start to realize like, at the end of the day, you create all these things and then you end up with, it ends up back on your plate. And then you're like, well, wait, I came up with this idea. Now all of a sudden I get it handed back to me. And so I'm just so much more cautious of the people on my team and being respectful to their bandwidth and knowing that it's really irresponsible for me to just dump. Now that doesn't mean that we're moving slow by any means, right? I am very fast and we take action quickly, but we're just more methodical about the way that we do it. And so what I've seen in a lot of businesses, you have a lot of people in leadership positions, whether this is a CEO, CMO, COO, whatever it may be, that's not actually supposed to be in that seat, right?
Sure.
And this is where you end up in misalignment so often here. And a lot of companies don't know the pain that they're actually in. And so the question I ask always is like, okay, like how many of the things that we start do we finish, right? And if we're not able to get things to the finish line, somewhere along the lines, you have some people process related issues. Because if you have the right people, they'll go, hey, Kris, we can't do it, right? We can't do it. And I think you see this in leadership teams. If you have an entire leadership team that is, everyone is agreeable, and you have a visionary that's spinning up ideas, and everyone's agreeable to what the visionary says next, pretty soon you have a gigantic mess. You have to have people that are strong enough that you trust that will push back on you and go, we can't do it. We want to, or they go the other way, which is always crazy for a nightmare for a visionary, which is, hey, what should we take off our priorities now to add this in?
Right.
Right, which is another way to do it. And so I think so much of that is how we got to this place, is getting people in the right seats, which, by the way, sounds so much easier than it actually is, right? And I recognize and realize that, but I think that's an important piece of this whole thing.
You know, it sounds really familiar from when I hired my COO, or our integrator, right, in different language. And one of the first things I asked her during our interview process was, will you tell me no? Right. And I don't remember how I phrased it, but long story short is I gave her the understanding that I expect to be told no. And it's her job to do so. I'm not going to stop with the ideas, and she needs to she needs to be that filter. So how do you go about, I'm hearing you talk a lot about people and teams and the people around you, and if they're in the right seat or not. How do you go about building a team? What's your approach to making sure you have all the right pieces on your executive team?
Yeah, of course.
In your organization.
I love it. So first and foremost, and some of this stuff, I mean, it really does sound simple, but it's not, right? So core values. Everyone hears about them everywhere. Everyone talks about them everywhere. It's in every business book. Yet, if you went and walked into any organization, how many of the companies that you went into would every single person in the organization know what the core values are, be able to speak to them, and share examples of how they're being lived out, right? And if you can't go into an organization and experience that level of feel, then the core values are either misaligned or there's something that hasn't been rolled out properly. And so first and foremost, like we just made a massive hire actually today, like an hour ago. Massive, biggest hire we've ever made in any of our companies ever. And first and foremost, I went and sat down and had a conversation about, this is who we are. This is what we believe in. Can you get behind it? I didn't talk about what are you great at? We didn't talk about comp. We didn't talk about any of the things. Can you get behind what we believe in? Like, this is where we're going. You think about like sports and the NFL. It's like, hey, when Tom Brady was playing, like the number one thing is like, it's that Lombardi trophy on the wall. Like, that's where we're going.
Well, so
like we are going there. And so like, if you don't have that mission and that vision dialed in, you're never going to get A players to stay.
Well, I'd be crazy not to ask then. What do you believe in, and where are you going?
Yeah. No, I love it. I walked you into it because I told you you're curious. No, I'm kidding. Let's go. Right. So our core values are let's go. That's the acronym, right? It's what I use all the time. It's what I've used my entire career. So you want to have something that people can remember, because a plaque on the wall and on the desk that you ripped off from Google or anywhere else, No one knows it. No one believes in it. No one remembers it. Therefore, it's not going to become part of your culture. So let's go is learning, empathy, tenacity, staying positive, generosity, and owning it. And that's what we believe in. And every single person in the company is hired that way. They are coached that way. And if it doesn't work, they're offboarded that way. And no one is going to be surprised in any of our companies if they are offboarded for not being a core value fit or not exhibiting what we believe in. And so just having those standards that are crystal clear and focused, that's why the front end work of making sure someone is right is so much easier than offboarding someone where you didn't do the work on the other side. You spent a year untangling the mess.
What's the old, 10-minute offense will prevent a 60-minute defense, right? It's
Yes.
take going right. So that's what you believe in. Where are you going? What are you working right? Where is Kris Lindahl and the Kris Lindahl family of companies? Where are you headed?
Yeah, so I love it. So one of the big things about our company right now is to elevate the lives of others, right? And so right now our focus is to elevate the lives of 10,000 people. And so the way that we're doing that is that ecosystem is they're all coming into our main brand, and we have different offerings depending on where someone is at in their life. So someone that wants speed and convenience, we're going to be able to acquire their property today. Like they want to move right now, no problem, we've got you. I think over the last couple of years, the click of a button, ease of use consumer is growing. Now, is it the entire market? No, but you have to be able to meet consumers where they're at and give them a series of options. And so as everyone comes into the ecosystem, they know our brand, they trust it. By the way, earlier when you asked about just to give people an idea of the size of our brand, I think that's got lost in translation with followers and likes and comments and influencers and all of that stuff. The real influencers are the ones that are actually running a true business each and every day. And so for context, between the areas we're in, there's about 7 million people that know who we are. Just like what you said earlier, Dan, you haven't met one person from Minnesota that doesn't know who we are.
Literally.
Right? So to create a brand where 7 million people are aware of who you are is really hard. To create, go buy a bunch of followers on any of the platforms and say, I've got 7 million followers, but my engagement's terrible. It's easy to do. Right. And so I think that gets lost in translation. You've got a lot of people that are looking around going where do we go? How do we do it? You got to follow someone that has actually done it. And so what we've done is we've built that brand, and we've studied all the brands around the world to really get honed in. And that brand creates the trust that consumers know when they come to us that we have options that we will follow through on and we will deliver for them. And I think that's really important when you create a brand, because another area where visionaries miss is they create this large brand and they put this big promise out there, and the experience is terrible. And then they take a huge reputation hit, right? And so that reputation hit then starts to fracture what the brand actually is. And that's, in that reputation. Now, let me just be clear. Of course, people locally in the industry don't love when you dominate a market. In every conversation that they go into, they ask about what Kris Lindahl does and how that works. People, if you're really successful, you appreciate it. If you're not where you want to be, you throw stones at it, right? And so that's a very different reputation thing that I'm talking about. The reputation I'm talking about are the people that ultimately at the end of the day that we serve, which is homeowners and home buyers in the real estate industry. We have not ever had an agent at another brokerage that has signed a contract with us and said, hey, you represent us. Never once have they said that. And I think people get really out of whack on this and think that their first priority is to the community. I'm not saying that the real estate agents in our community isn't a priority, isn't super important, but if we don't take care of the people that we meet that come to our brand first, the agents and all the other things that we have, they're not going to be there, right? So you got to get super focused on making sure that's right first. And as you do that, what happens is you're then able to highlight the success stories. Because I think another thing in branding and marketing is high skepticism for someone that's out there everywhere. We assume as human beings, they must have cheated the system. Something went wrong. Where'd all the money come from? Something's got to be completely out of whack for this to happen. And so the more that you can showcase success stories, testimonials, wins, highlights of not only what it's like for a customer or someone to come into your ecosystem, but also what it's like for someone to work there, to be a part of the community. who is Kris? What is the organization? What is it actually like? Not from Kris, because no one trusts me, right? The trust of the person that's putting the marketing out there is significantly lower than what you hear from other people. And so it's just so different, right? It's
What's one of your favorite things that you've ever done around a success story? Around proof of, right? Like highlighting the result that a client got. And you're one of the most creative people I know. So I have to imagine that there's something you've done where you just was different from what virtually anybody else in your industry would have done. Anything fun you can think of that you've done with a success story?
Yeah, we've done so many different things. Like, this is a funny one. This is not a high dollar one by any means, but it's funny. So we had a past client, a really good, really close friend that owns a house and selling the house and moving on, posted on Facebook and said, I really loved those Tombstone pizzas. Like, I miss those frozen Tombstone pizzas. I miss them. So I saw that and I went on Instacart and I ordered 25 Tombstone pizzas with no name on who it was from. And I waited and I just waited. And the next day he's like, hey, by chance, did you happen to send me any Tombstone pizzas? I said, well, what are you talking about? He's like, I thought the only person that would ever be creative enough to see a Facebook post and order 25 Tombstones would be you. So that's a good example of just being self-aware of, like, okay, this person was wondering about this. Like, it took me 5 minutes and $100 to make a massive impact. And I think the reason why I share that story, in a world that is so crazy and so busy and there's so much divisiveness, to cut through and be different is not easy. And when you think about your life and everything that you've done up to this point, the moments you remember is because they were oddly different than anything else you've experienced. And when you continue to do things that are predictable and feel and look like what everyone else does, that goes in the part of the brain of, like, I've heard and seen this before. And by tomorrow, it's gone. And so what are the things in business that you can do that, like, no one's ever ordered 25 pizzas and had them show up at my door, right? It's just those little things. Like, and I think you've got people all the time that go out and they say, oh, I'm going to go order this, $2,000 thing that's got the company logos and brand all over it. And we're going to send this thing out, or they're going to be able to get this catalog and pick all these things that's our brand. Like, the most effective way to create an experience with customers is to deliver things that are about them, not about you. And so many people miss that basic little principle.
Really, really good. Really good. So aside from, and they're tied together, you have the Kris Lindahl real estate brand. So you're also known for a second brand. And I'd like to unpack, why did you build this second brand? Why did you put so much energy into it, continue to? And then how have you just really expertly kind of integrated the two together? And that being your Be Generous.
Yep.
Now I'm calling it a brand. Might be your Be Generous tagline. At the end of the day, you're just as well known for wearing a Be Generous shirt or T-shirt or hat than KLRE one. So take us into that. How are you using that? And what would you say that any business, like, is it something that any business owner should be thinking about, looking at, and why?
Yeah, I love the question. So I think there's something I'd like to go deeper on that I said before that plays right into this.
Sure.
And that's back to the core values. When you are in a business and you own 100% of the company, there's a lot of different structures to business. You could have a board of directors, there could be partnerships, there could be a lot of things. But when you are the owner, the sole owner of the business, the core values are yours. As soon as you add board of directors, partners, the core values change. And so when I look at my life and my journey of truly coming from nothing and having to overcome so many things throughout my life, like, being a coach and a teacher was what I wanted to do as soon as I had those mentors that coached and taught me. And so I went to college. I have 2 education degrees. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. Naturally, I was always an entrepreneur, but it took me a little while to figure that out. But I at my core and at my heart, like, I am a coach and a teacher. And so generosity to me was giving back that time, treasures, and talents, and making an impact on others the same way people did that for me. And so the reason why that is so important and why you see me wearing shirts and why generosity is part of our core values is because of where I came from. If I didn't have those people in my life at those moments when I needed them, I would not be on this podcast sharing the way that I am today. And so if I can be that person, or people in our community can be that person for someone that's in need, that's worth way more than money can ever buy, right? I didn't need money then. I probably thought I did because I didn't have any. But what I needed is I needed wisdom. I needed mentorship. I also needed someone to believe in me. And there's so many people in the world that just need someone to believe in them at that moment.
For you.
My coach, John Swanson, my 8th grade football coach. I had never played football in my life. I was 5 days I was 5 days late to tackle football, which I'd never played. I came in and he put me in nose tackle. He's like, listen, we don't have time to get you up to speed. You missed all the practices. And so I was in at nose tackle, and I quickly started figuring it out pretty quickly. And there's a distinct moment that I remember. And actually my next book will be done in like 3 weeks, which is my life story so far. And I put this in my book. There's a distinct moment. I remember him standing with me on the field. Remember earlier I said those moments that are oddly different are the ones you remember. Why can I recite exactly what happened in 8th grade on that field, on that turf, that day? Because it was so different than anything I'd ever heard. He's like, listen, Kris. He goes, you're really intelligent. He goes, you're really intelligent. If you stick with this, you're going to be a heck of an athlete. And I distinctively remember that right there. And for the first time in my life, I had someone that gave me that belief and that confidence. And my entire life changed in that moment. I mean, I went on to I became this crazy athlete. I started believing in it. I mean, it just went, and probably there were times where it was a little imbalanced, quite honestly. Like, right? I mean, I maybe got a little too confident. I was probably a little overly competitive, right? Because I got so much confidence from him so fast. And then he started putting me in situations in football. And then it's kind of neat. He also was my 9th grade basketball coach then. So he started putting me in positions where I could win, right? So now you got the belief and the confidence, like, you got this.
So
you're going to be good.
Have you taken what he did for you, how much impact it made, which we could all see and we can all hear? And how are you using that? I have to imagine you are to this day, passing it on to others. Is it something that you're consciously aware of? Is it something that you've built a system around? Is it like, what's the way you look to mentor, to coach, to impact other people like that?
Yeah. I love the question. So every day, right? So every day I'm reflecting at the end of the day, like, what did I do that was generous today? Like, it's very simple. It doesn't have to be super overcomplicated with some sophisticated journal that's so overwhelming that you use it for 2 days and then it goes in a junk drawer with the rest of them. Like, this is very simple. Like, what did you do today to make an impact? Some days I'll just share some of mine. Some days it's simply a video to one person that is just coaching them, training them. They could be inside our company. It could be someone in the community. Some days it's a in-person. Like, I host some local masterminds at no cost to other aspiring entrepreneurs. Like, I just had one a few weeks ago. There were 35 people there, right? And so I'm not asking for anything. Like, I just want to give back and deliver value.
Now, was that in the real estate space or the business community?
No, business community. Yeah, no one was in real estate there.
Right.
They could have been, but just oddly enough, no one took me up on it, which says a lot about the industry as a whole. But yeah, no. So it's just a business community, right? And so what I started learning, and I think you've seen this, Dan, just as much as I have, like, a lot of what we thought were like these very specific problems to running a real estate business are basically transferable to most businesses.
That's what this podcast is all about.
Yes.
That's what we're doing right here.
Yes, exactly. And so when we bring in this group into our office, the things are the same. But I always love the breakthroughs because just like I thought in the early days, they think the same way. I'm in financial planning. I've got all this regulation. It's this, it's that. It's like, right? And they believe in their mind that everything that they have is uniquely different to what everyone else has. And they end up stuck in their own way and they never break through. And so if I can be that spotlight to go, listen, I was just like you. I thought my problems in this company when we first started were exclusive to us and no one understood and no one had any idea. And I couldn't even talk about it because it was so complex. And then as you start expanding your horizon, you start talking to smart thinkers and big thinkers, and you start, really growing the community that you have around you, you start realizing that the problems aren't unique to you.
It's amazing how humans are just we're all so different, but we are all so alike, right? And
I
like
know. I
there's these
know.
things that we all just fall into. Oh yeah, that works everywhere, but not in my market.
I know.
Oh, that works everywhere except for not with my product, even though it's similar to, it's just
It's everywhere.
we
It's like
all
that
fall into.
limited belief, a limited belief is a dangerous thing.
So be generous, clearly, right? It's part of your core values. You're living it. You ask yourself that daily question, tying it back to business, because I'm not sure that I've seen a more masterful. I don't know if the word's marriage. I don't know if the word is integration of the charitable component or the community component, which for you is be generous, right? It's really turned in its own brand, but how it ties right back into the business. It does. I mean, and we should not be afraid to say it creates business opportunities, as it should. And the more it does, the more you can give and the more generous you can be. And, people should never be ashamed of that. That's a beautiful thing. But you didn't stumble into that. Like, I feel like you masterminded how that would work. Walk us
Yeah.
through that.
Yeah. So what you find in a lot of companies, like in a founder CEO, where especially like more of a personal brand, is that you have to have alignment with who you are and what you put out there. And the miss for a lot of companies is they find success and maybe they find themselves in a situation where like, hey, I'm overwhelmed. I need to bring some people on. I need to get help. I'm stuck. And they bring people on. But the reality is they weren't really meant to be the spokesperson out front. And so they're uncomfortable with it. And so you can feel that energy either from the lack of what they're putting out there or the way that they're connecting or not connecting in their communities. And so much of this is being authentic, truly. Like, and so for me, like, whether I'm in the community or I'm here on a podcast or wherever I'm at, I'm actually the same person. Like, it does not feel like work to me to be generous. That isn't some sort of tool to go like, I'm going to be generous today because I want to get this back. I am simply like living out my dream of like, here's what I overcame and I want to make this difference for others in their life. And I think once you have alignment with, and by the way, mine doesn't have to be anyone else's, right? Everyone's got their unique core values and things that have happened along their journey, but you have to have alignment with what you put out there and how you live. And no one, and what I found in this, no one wants to work for a fake, right? No one does. No one wants to be in an organization. No one wants to be around someone that says, I'm this, but you're watching me in real life be this, right? So like, this isn't some fake movie out there. This is real life with a lot of lives that are being impacted from a lot of different directions because of the decisions that I make or don't make. And so everything that I do, I have to be very intentional with how I live and what I do to make sure that I am being that mentor and I'm being a leader for others. And I think the miss is that people put this brand out there and they throw everything out there, but they don't actually live what they're putting out there. And so where you really see the breakthrough, where you're saying like the alignment and the way that you've seen this happen is where those things are so closely aligned. Like who this person is, what they say on social media, what they say in person, how you see them respond is the same everywhere, right? And everyone should think about internally, like, what is your spokesperson playbook or guidebook? Whether that's, Steve Jobs representing Apple or Tim Cook. They see the world differently, but they're unified in the Apple message, right? You look at, Steve Jobs and he's on stage of this techie, like brainiac type thing. And you look at Tim Cook and he's strolling down parks and different areas. And like, it's a different style, but the message is still unified with what Apple is doing and how they're transforming the things that are important to them. And so it's the same thing here.
I think you're talking about authenticity. And when all of your, not just your business, but your messaging, your lifestyle, when it's all when it's all authentically the message you're putting out, you don't have to remember the script.
No.
You don't have to remember, wait a second, hold on. I have the be generous thing going right now, so let me adjust my behavior. You get to just be you.
So true. And the other thing and you see this often, is people end up leveraging themselves out of their core competency at the same time. So now the dangerous part is everyone's chasing this 8th level, 100th level. I'm going to step out and be in the owner's box. by the way. And so now you've got a new branding and marketing team that is creating how you see the world. Hey, I need you to go shoot this video with this script on this teleprompter in this neighborhood today. Right? And so pretty soon the voice and what got you to where you were is lost in translation. The best example of this is in private equity, right? You see companies that get acquired, and all of a sudden the founder's energy and message gets diluted. And why do all these companies just blow up? I see it happen more often than not, right? Because they lose that energy and they lose that feel. And once that's gone, you can't recreate it. And you've seen this before where they try to bring the founder back in to rescue it. I actually saw one of the biggest brands just sent an email like 3 hours ago, not even in real estate, like in a self-education space. We're bringing this person back. This person hasn't been there in 10 years and sold the business. Now all of a sudden they're struggling. They're in a tough spot. The email subject line is like, they're coming back. Here comes the hero with the cape. They're going to solve all the problems, but the damage has already been done. Once you transform and step out of what you were great at, it's hard to get back in. And you see so many people that end up with a business that was doing really well. They step out because like, hey, this is doing amazing. And then the biggest piece of this whole thing is like that marketing, branding, the connection to the mission and the purpose fractures. And a lot of times you then also, by the way, I'm also speaking from experience because I was very close to doing some of this and I know exactly what it feels like and looks like. And then what you do is as you grow and have more success, you have more resources to go hire more talent people that don't have the institutional knowledge of your organization, but are highly successful and well regarded in their position and in their skill set, but they don't have the knowledge of the company. So now they come in and go, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And they're calling all the shots, but that feel is missing. And so many people make decisions with brands, especially B2C, based on, and of course B2B too, but B2C for sure, on how they feel. Trust, right? Companies brand, and they create this because it creates trust and connection. Once you lose that, it's really hard to get it back. And you've seen this with so many different brands that have ended up making a crazy decision, like we're going to hire this influencer and it didn't relate to the core audience, or we're going to do this. And all of a sudden the thing just goes spiral out of control fast. Like, right? So it takes years and years and years to build this massive brand. And if you're not responsible with it, you can throw it in the gutter really fast.
So let's stay there for a moment. What you have a lot. I mean, you're in a good place. Your brand is solid. A lot of good pieces, but like anybody else, right? It's the old. If you go back and look at the Fortune 500 list from 30 years ago or what have you, half the companies aren't in business anymore. So if you go in, or if you think about what can take your business down or threaten your business, kill your business, when you look at the competitive landscape, the social landscape, the way that the people you're talking to employ, right? The younger people, everything's always evolving. What are the biggest threats you see to your business? And really, I ask that because it's maybe to any of our businesses.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think in an organization like this, key man is a real thing, right? So what happens if something happens to Kris is a thought that goes through my mind every single day. And why I am on this journey to get the right people in the right seats, which by the way, I'm years and years and years and years into this, and we still are evolving and pivoting and making adjustments because the landscape changes, what consumers want, what employees and agents want, all of it is evolving and adapting. But a business that's really dependent on the key man is a major threat, right? So really thinking through like, how do we create a sustainable business that if Kris leaves next week to go on vacation or something happens in his life and he has to leave for an extended period of time, will this business run? And I think there's all kinds of exercises you can do to really get there. But there's some very basic ones like, hey, if Kris stepped away, would the revenue go up or would it decline? Right? Like would things still keep moving long term? And I can confidently say today that our business would continue to grow and evolve if I took a step back. Like it would definitely keep moving. Now, would we have some challenges 12 months, 24 months, 36 months down the road of seeing around corners on the vision piece? Likely. Will we forever? Probably not. Right. So like, I think that's the most obvious one that people most likely are thinking or maybe not even talking about. But
Well,
that's
I
the
think it's the
obvious.
most obvious one. It's the most obvious one people are not thinking about.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one. I mean, that's the one that it's like we all want to think that, we're invincible and, nothing can ever happen. But I've seen life show up for a lot of people in a lot of different ways that was unexpected. And in a moment's notice, the entire thing shifts. And so I know my core responsibility for the people in our company, their families, the communities that we serve is this business can't be dependent on Kris. Doesn't mean that I don't love being here. Doesn't mean that I don't want to be around or any of that. But I have to responsibly think around, okay, how does this become less and less on Kris if something were to happen?
Sure.
And and I think, you see this all the time. This is no different than people that don't really plan out their will. They don't really plan out like what happens if something happens to me? What happens with the kids? What happens? Like most people neglect that planning phase. And I think it's irresponsible, especially if you choose the path like we have, which is to continue, evolve, and grow. If you want to continue to grow, but you're going to neglect what the plan is if something happens to you, that is a very dangerous spot to be in. And so for me, I think that's the place that's the biggest risk for most companies.
What's your number one tool that you use to assess who you're going to bring into the organization to fill these seats? Because so much of the focus today has been around getting the right people in, top grading your talent. Especially, I think you're talking at an executive level, at a leadership level. So by the way, I'm going to ask him this question, guys. I already did, but I'm going to rephrase it. But it's not an easy button. Let's just make sure we put that out there. But I know that you like tools, you like assessments, you believe in their efficacy. So what's the number one tool that if somebody listening who's in the process of hiring others, building out business, building out teams, that if they introduced what tool to their process, would their process be immediately enhanced?
Yeah, great question. Aside from the core values, of course, and interviews and reference checks, which are not tools, but important, we then go to assessments. And I definitely want to caution everyone here before I say what I'm going to say. I am super obsessed with understanding who people are at a level that most people are not interested in being. So this is not something to dabble in. But if you read like Ray Dalio's Principles book and you understand like how he built what he did, it was all about the people. Like, how do you become that massive? You have to be obsessed with understanding people and evaluating who they are and making sure you're getting them in the right seat. And the way that we do that is about 15 assessments. And the reason why I caution everyone on this is I have tens of thousands of hours into assessments, tens of thousands of hours, not like just dabbling around like, hey, I'm going to grab this assessment, or someone sent me an email and said I should use this one. And so what makes us so powerful isn't necessarily the assessments and the combination. It's that we understand what the assessments show up as in the real world. Where people make the mistake is they start looking at assessments and put people in boxes, right? And they go like, oh, well, this is that profile and this is that profile, and they're inefficient here, inefficient there. And all of a sudden you have everyone in these little boxes, and in your mind, it basically starts to come across like you're managing robots, right? And so you have to know how these assessments show up in the real world more than you have to understand what the assessments themselves are saying. And so once you draw the correlation between the two of those, that's when it becomes really dangerous, because now you're like, I know exactly who you are. Let me give you a couple of questions. Let me give you a couple of thoughts. And it's almost like you are reading exactly where they've been and who they are. And I will tell you that there are so many people that are skeptical of assessments, that are skeptical that you can put people in a box. But when you go into our organization, or you go into a really high-level organization that's done the work of understanding how the framework of assessments can work, and you add core values and all the other things, I mean, this is not the only thing. There's a bunch of layers to this. Once you see it in real life, it all clicks. When you go, wow, this makes sense. And then breaking it down and going, here's how we hired this person. We looked at this, we looked at this, we looked at this, we looked at this. We knew that these were areas that were a concern, but we knew that these were massive opportunities here. And we openly talked and developed a plan before we hired them. Hey, here's where we think you can excel. Here's where what we gotta look out for. And by the way, any conversation with the C-level I'm in, the first thing I do is, here's me. Here's everything about me. I want you to study and understand me to make sure that you're comfortable with exactly who I am. I'm comfortable with who I am, and I'll be able to highlight and tell you where my shortcomings are and where my genius is, so that we're really on the same page of having transparency, vulnerability, and make sure that we're on the same page, which creates a different level of trust. Say, hey, like, I'm not great at everything. Like, there's some things that I've fallen short on and will continue to fall short on, and you will too. But let's openly talk about those before we start, so that later we're not in a review or some sort of tool that's like the people analyzer or whatever tool it is. And you're like, well, you're missing here and you're missing there. And you're doing some sort of feedback sandwich of like, oh, you're great here. This is terrible. Oh, by the way, you're still great. I would much rather have those conversations up front than I would later. And then that way everyone's on the same page. And guess what? People feel heard and met when you can meet them where they're at and who they are and have those conversations before they come in. The problem is very few people spend the time on the front side of interviewing and connecting with talent and then onboarding, and they spend way more time on trying to clean it up after the fact. Constant reviews and meetings and all these things. Had they just put the work in on the front side, it would have made it way easier. And sometimes there are people that aren't right for you today. They might be an A player in another business or a B player in another business, and they might be a B player in your business, A player in your business, or C player. Like every business that someone goes into, like they could be someone different. Example, Tom Brady is a good example, was a B or a C level quarterback until Drew Bledsoe got hurt. And in that moment, Tom Brady went from a C probably to a B to very quickly an A. But when they first drafted him, he was not like, this is the A player that is the future. Right? It's the same thing here. We bring in someone that maybe another company didn't recognize, didn't understand, that we've figured out through our assessments, through our plan. They were like, hey, we know you're not there today, but here's the path for you to get there. Right? And I think people don't do that work. They don't spend that time with the people, which we all know we're only as good as our team.
You're spot on, man. Just a lot to think about and unpack there. And especially, look, here's what I'm taking from it. You might choose Working Genius or the DISC or, Myers-Briggs. Or you might choose any of them, or you likely don't need 15. But whichever one you do choose, understand it, really know it. Because the big aha there is, there's what the assessment says, but I bet that two different organizations, yours and another, reading the same assessment sometimes you might make the same decision, but I bet often you would make a different decision, because what you're saying is, because you've gone so deep on it, you actually know how that shows up in the real world.
And each business has a different need too, right?
So I love that. That's huge. So just round it out. A couple of really quick questions. Are you in any business communities right now, like a YPO, an EO, Tiger 21, or where are you learning right now? What's your current learning mentorship or environment? Not where no matter where you are, you'll be giving, but where you're also there to receive.
Yeah, great question. I'm not in any organizations right now. All of my mentorship comes one-on-one from people that I'm close friends with. And I'm super protective of my time, and I make sure that wherever I go, that I can provide value, but I can also get value back. So I have to be in an environment where there's reciprocation. And if there's not, I've been in rooms where I'm getting the life sucked out of me. And I've also been on the other side of that, where I'm sucking the life out of someone else. And I know what they feel like because I've been on the other side of it. Right. And so that one-on-one environment for me I found is better for where I'm at today. Right. I mean, my daughter's first year of high school, that's the top priority. We're running around playing soccer all over the place, which, by the way, I had to reschedule an hour earlier, and Dan was kind enough with your time to adjust that because she's got a game after this. But what I found is that as we grow as entrepreneurs, we become so obsessed with like wanting information and wanting the fast pass and wanting to skip the line that pretty soon we're sacrificing a lot more time than we probably should be for ourselves and for the people around us. Right. And I found myself there too. Trust me, I can get spun up real fast and imbalanced quickly. I think as I get a little bit older, I've got people around me that provide me a little wisdom to really poke a few holes that I trust. And I know they'll challenge me like, hey, like you seem like you're running like a little wide open here. Right. And so like, and so I think we all need to have those people around us that essentially are those thermostats or those regulators to say like, hey, like we got to turn the temperature down a little bit here.
You found your one-on-one relationships and you've created boundaries, which is great.
Yes. Yes.
KPIs. We're gonna finish off on a dry topic, really dry. We don't have to go deep, but it's really just curious. Which are the 2 to 4 you focus on running a real estate business with different aspects in real estate, the investment side, the retail side, perhaps some others, your recruiting agents to your brokerage. So there's a lot of different things you might be measuring. At the end of the day, if you were off in, Europe on something, but you had 1 minute to talk to the office and get some data, what are the 2 to 4 things you want to know?
Yeah, great question. I think this gets totally lost in translation. I would quite honestly say most people watching probably don't even have a great idea of what KPIs even are, right? So you've got leading and lagging, and you've got all these different things. And so what I found is that oftentimes, when in the early days, I will be fully transparent here, we were tracking laggings on almost everything. And we couldn't actually even move the business with what we were tracking. It was and what I mean by that, it was old news, right? We were tracking closings, which is in this market with interest rates, might be 6 months, might be 12 months, might be 3 months, like from when that first appointment happened, or even maybe that conversation. Maybe it was just a phone appointment. Maybe it was a social media message, right? So conversations, whether it's with, buyers, sellers, agents, and by the way, this is transferable to any business, like those conversations are really the leading indicator of what happens next, right? Whether that's, that could end up being an appointment set, appointment met, appointment held. There's all kinds of different terms that different organizations use, but it all starts with a conversation in the B2C world. And so if you don't have conversations, you're not having enough conversations, you can't get to the other 20 KPIs that are a priority. And so therefore, if you're only looking at the lagging, what you'll see is like, wow, like all these laggings don't look right. Like they look way off. What are we going to do? And I know if you're like me in the early days, you try to create like just sheer force of like, hey, we got to have a call night. Hey, we got to do this. We need more accountability. We need more training. We need more of this. We need more of that. And what I realized is like what I was looking at, the efforts that I was putting in to change that number were not right. And so you have to, it can become, KPIs can become very overwhelming, like, especially if you truly don't understand them. And so simplification, I think, is kind of what you were saying there is that like, you got to drill down of like, what are the things that you want at 8 o'clock every night that if those are happening, you feel really good about where your business is going. Right. And there are different ways to look at that. You might want a couple like conversations on whatever business you're in and what you're selling. And then you might want to know like, okay, how many of them are we getting under contract? Because that contract might be another 45 or 60 days. And so basically what I'm saying at the end of the day is cash conversion cycles, right? And I could take it a crazy level different. Like, hey, if I create this ad or this advertisement, and which is harder for us because of how large our brand is, but if I took a very direct response ad, we would build a cash conversion cycle from when we send that out or we put that out, from when that potential customer registers to where they're at in every single leading, lagging KPI until money comes back. If I put dollars here, does it take me 100 days, 200 days, 300 days to get cash back? Right. And so what in the early days in our business, we had read all the books and done all the studies, and we had a bunch of KPIs that we tracked decently well. But when we went to mastery, we started tracking cash conversion cycles for everything in our business, right? To understand, like, when you put dollars here, here's when they come back. And when you build a sophisticated brand and you scale, you actually need to know, like, what it's going to look like for the money to come back. In the early days, so many people got lucky because they were riding you look at most of the teams that were created from 2009 up, they rode this wave up. And then all of a sudden there's this turbulence. If you don't understand the cash conversion cycles, you can get yourself hurt really badly on the financial side of things.
Love that. Love that, man. Thank you. We got to get you to a basketball game. So
yes, let's go.
Your daughter's ready to go. Send her my best, please. I hope she has a great game. And so good luck to her team.
Soccer game.
The soccer game? Then never mind. Never mind. Nah, I'm kidding, man. I'm excited. I love soccer. In fact, I just got myself 4 tickets to the new upcoming San Diego MLS team that's coming finally. And anyway, good luck to her. Kris, thanks for coming on, man. We'll have to circle back with you some down the road, and we it's just always fun to rap with you, buddy. And I hope I get to see you in person soon. And thank you. You can find him easily, by the way, if you want to follow Kris on Instagram. So just find Kris Lindahl. You can't miss him. And we'll see you on the next episode.